I'd like to introduce first on Zoom, we have Carmen and Fernholz from Western Minnesota. He has been a long time advocate of organic farming and cover cropping back into the 80s before all that. So, to my immediate left here is Jerry Ford from Living Stone Farm, sort of in more west central kind of area where we'll call. And then Lynne Reeck from Singing Hills, but there's a theme coming there. Jerry in Southeast Minnesota. So I'm going to first explain why Carmen is with us. His vitality was notable and came down with COVID a few days ago, and he's fine. He was testing and everything was good, and then up the two little pink lines this morning, and he thought it was the best. But that I have to stay home. So welcome, Carmen. Can you give us a little introduction to yourself and to your farm, and we'll go from there.
Okay, yeah, Carmen Fernholz, my wife Sally and I farm near Madison, Minnesota. Started farming in 1972, and then just recently retired in 2020. And over the years, we were first certified organic in 1975, and worked with the certification organizations over the years, and so have been certified all those years. And over the years, planted the regular crops: corn, soybeans, small grains, and alfalfas. And just recently did introduce a cow-calf beef herd on the farm with the young family that I'm transitioning operations to. But we can get into those details a little bit later.
Thank you, Carmen.
Jerry Ford with Living Stone Farm. We're about 15 minutes north of West Cape here, near Howard Lake.
And tell us how long have you been on that farm?
Well, my wife's family has been there since 1898. I'm very fond, and so I've been there personally back in 2000.
Hi, I'm Lynne. I'm the former owner operator of Singing Hills Safari near Nursedown, Minnesota, which if you get on the side of Nursedown, is close to the Wood State Park, and also not too far from Northfield and Fairville, and halfway.
And when did you move down there, or you were born there?
No, I was born in Central Minnesota on a family farm. My brother inherited that farm, and I was searching for ways to even farming for a long time. I was for other farmers, part-time farming, and then quite as one. And in 1996, I bought 15 acres with a mortgage, and we expanded it to 25 acres about 10 years later.
And so I've been to your farm mostly recently, all of you. And can you explain to people a little bit about what farm was like? Yeah, give us a little bit of feel for you.
So while I was transitioning, I described it to people as the most beautiful farm in the country. That's, personally how I felt about it. It had everything. It's got rolling hills with pasture land. It's got about 10 acres of tillable that has an under row crops. During the 26 years that I lived there, I kept all the land covered. So there's pasture and feeding on the land. And there's beautiful oak savanna. It's close to the Wood State Park, so you have that probably nearby. There's a ravine that runs through the property that then feeds the Creek watershed. The land itself is heavy clay soil. It's some of the richest farmland in Rice County. And I was next door to one of the biggest farmers in Rice County when I got the property in '96. And when we moved there, it had been rented for a long time, so it was in a need of many repairs. And that was the first one of the this was trying to, fix up very aging.
When you got there, you were intentional at doing goat dairy and cheese, the farmstead cheese.
No,
Nobody chooses goats. Goats choose you. Is that the?
yeah, essentially. I mean, I worked for a lot of different farmers, like I said, so I worked for Garden Vegan in Martin and it's Bickley for 2 years. I worked for Manitoba and Danson Williams, and I worked for Stephen Reed and Lynne and Jody at Shepherd's Way. I also worked in big cow dairy. So after I left the family farm, I experienced whatever kind of farming there was. And initially I started trying to do vegetable farming there, but I realized very quickly that I didn't have the equipment I needed. And all of that farming that I needed to do by hand was just not going to work out. And so I did vegetable farming for 2 years before I kind of hit the death wall. I wasn't really in a position to borrow more money at that point. I had to build up equity. My business was started with a second mortgage and an FSA loan. That's how I started it in 2009. I started saving a month today.
Jay, so tell us a little bit about the flavor for
These little stuff. Well, I have to write down, otherwise the slide will go off.
you're already doing.
So we're located on what was transition from Big Woods to Prairie and Savannah area, and we're actually the other most beautiful farm that along with Carmen, and rich loam soil, such a gift. And my wife is, as I mentioned, fourth generation. Our house is about 90 feet from where the original homestead house was. It was there in 1898, and those said family bought it. And the first was a subsistence farm for the first couple of generations, and then they moved into dairy, small dairy, also.
Wow. Hi, Terry. So we've heard a little bit about the big song and singing those dairy and what it's like looking there and what the landscape is, the topography, and how they sort of got to the practices and kind of farming they do. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
First of all, I grew up near Madison. Madison is, for those of you who don't know, is straight west of Minneapolis and St. Paul, about 150 miles. In fact, we're only about 15 miles from South Dakota. Grew up near Madison, and then went away to college, taught high school English, did some coaching for about 6-7 years, and then decided that I wanted to go back to farming. And so instead of going on to graduate school, I went and bought a farm one February morning in 1972, and 80 acres just across the field from the farm that I grew up. So Lac-La-Prairie County, Madison area has been my home all my life, virtually, except for the years that I was gone. But when I did start farming, an interest that was with me from the beginning was doing certified organic, and this was in 1972. And so I started working towards figuring out how I could farm organically, and it was a challenge. There weren't any books about it, not a whole lot. A lot of people practicing it, and so it was an adventure, but certainly something that over the years I have really grown to appreciate. And of course, we've seen what has happened with organics over the years. But the farm itself is an ordinary farm. The 80 acres turned into about 400 acres over a 10 to 15 year period. There were acreages that came up for sale, some from my uncle and some from a neighbor who needed to sell some land during the 1980s. And so that's how we accumulated that approximately 400 acres. Over the years, we also tried a livestock enterprise of farrow to finish hogs, but in a matter of about 20 years, that whole concept of raising livestock on a smaller scale, 60, even 70 sows, became obsolete because of what happened to the hog industry. But we were able to continue doing the organic. And when I look back at it, it really was a godsend, because eventually it did put Sally and me in a really great financial position, so that when we did approach the idea of transitioning, we had some options. But the farm itself still is operating with the new renters, Luke and Allie Peterson.
Fell in love with the farm. My wife, you can't separate her from the land anyway. And so if I wanted to retain my marriage, I was going to need to fall in love with that farm, which I did immediately. I'm from the South. I'd never been to Minnesota before I met her. And so we have that ethic, this philosophy, this spirituality tied in with the land. And this was from my father-in-law on through us and on to our next generation. And so the primary goal is to protect and steward this land. And, you know, again, it's only 288 acres. This isn't going to change the world, but it's ours to care for. We feel like we are loaned this land. Yeah, we hold the deed. You know, our name is on that, but it's loaned to us. And part of this loan is to not pay it back, but to pay it forward. And that's what what my father-in-law worked on and what we're working on. And part of that paying forward is to pay our community in dividends. So we provide really nice grass-fed beef for them, and we provide certified organic garlic. A little questionable there are the benefits, but and then we have the other thing that we provide to our community, our other product, is these conservation practices, setting aside land just for the wildlife, just for the soil and the water.
And so that comes to that question of, you know, you've been working on it 30 years. The minute you walked on it, you were probably looking at how you were going to continue that on. And that's, I think we've all heard that you can never start too early in that planning process. And it sounds like you got that message really early. Lynne, how did you come to, and I know you've been working on your transition for quite a while as well, but how did that like manifest in your thinking, and how did you kind of get to that?
Well, it was very different for me. My transition planning, quote unquote, started because of an emergency change in my circumstances. So what the previous speaker was talking about, that you should start planning when you start farming, is no, you know, it should be taken seriously, because from my perspective, it's not just that you're eventually going to get too old to farm, it's that something could happen. Farming is one of the most dangerous occupations you can have, and unexpected things happen every day. And for me, an emergency change in my partnership situation resulted in me needing to, after going down many dead ends, really get serious about thinking about transition. And needless to say, renewing the countryside and American Farmland Trust really helped me with that process. When I got there, it took 5 years overall of working the business and trying to figure out what the future looked like. And the things that guided me were my values. So have your values in place and prioritize them as well. My main value was protecting the land because it's highly erodible. and it's beautiful. And I want somebody else to, in this world, in this, universe, to be able to enjoy it. So the first value for me was the land. And the second one, given the fact that it was so hard for me to get started, I wanted to be able to help somebody if I could.
Yeah, I think you both are, you both touched on it a little bit. The land is beautiful, it's highly erodible, it's all this, it's but you love it. That's really kind of what drives that. I forgot to mention, there's like Post-it notes on your tables. If you have questions, please jot them down, like in short form, because and then we'll collect those with like 15 minutes left, or Bonnie will, and you can raise your hand at that point. Hey, Carmen, so we missed part of that origin story. We'll just assume that you're part of the legion of superheroes up here. What I'd like to jump to is a quick question on what your decision-making process was for getting started in a transition, and how you sort of thought about where you were going to go if it wasn't, to a family member or something like that.
Yeah, just to reference Jerry's comment about walking on the land. February 1972, a day I closed on the land, and it was a cold, windy day, but I signed the papers, and within hours, I was out walking over the farmland and looking at it and saw how it had been abused. And so with good mentoring from my dad, and especially from my uncle, that became the driving force for me to really value the land, but then to take it the next step further, and then of course to take it to organic. And I keep emphasizing organic because over the years then, I really engaged myself in promoting and generating more organic production across the country. So it really became my second vocation, if you want to call it, of getting organic going. And so when it did come to the realization that, hey, I'm going to have to hang it up one of these days, how am I going to keep this farm transitioning to organic? Because so that, or keep it organic. And so that became the driving force for me. But the other piece that came into play was the challenges that I experienced that my parents had in transitioning out of farming. We finally, in the end, talked them into putting together a trust so that the farm could move to the next generation. And there was some sibling controversies there that certainly surfaced at that point. And so having experienced that, Sally and I decided we have to make something happen sooner rather than later. So that's what really drove me to doing it. And then I wanted to make sure that our children were engaged in the process so that they had vested interest in how this farm transitioned to them. So those are the things that really drove me to looking at the system that I eventually came up with.
Tell us a little bit about that system, if you can. In brief, we don't need to get into the nitty-gritty details. Some of those are going to be very specific to your farm and your family. But in general, what was the structure?
Yeah, generally what it is now is called a family limited partnership. And so what it amounts to is over a period of, for us, it amounted to over a period of 10 years, we gifted a portion of the land, including the house and buildings, to our 4 children. And so simply stated, the 4 children now own 98% of the farm, but Sally and me retain 2% and retain the position of general manager, which means that we still make the decisions about how the farm is operated. And so I can rent it to whomever I want, or if we decide that we want to sell it, all of us would have to agree. But generally the operation of the farm still is in Sally and my realm to make the decisions.
And then at a certain point, that remaining 2% in management goes somewhere. Yeah, you can't take it with you, they say.
That's exactly right. So eventually, I can Sally and I can give up even that 2% management, and then it's all within the 4 children's realm to do what they wish.
Excellent. Lynne, tell us a little bit about the structure for how, because we had a great lesson on easements, and I think that was part of your story. And tell us a little bit about that structure.
Yes, so because my transition came up unexpectedly, I had very real financial considerations, and I needed debt. I had debt that I needed to pay off to make the transition happen. And the value of the land itself was pretty far beyond the reach of most beginning farmers. So we did a buy, protect, sell option. American Farmland Trust bought the property from me. They put an easement on the land, a conservation easement, which stipulates how the land can be used in the future. And then they sold it to a emerging farmer. The place of getting to the easement placement was probably the hardest because that's expensive. And so we did several fundraisers trying to come up with the money for that. Also, money for the new farmer to be able to afford the land, even with the easement on it. So, I had put quite a few improvements on the property, and even though the house was still old and not the greatest house in the world, there were improvements there as well that were part of the evaluation. So yeah, it was a real balancing act trying to get there, as you guys know.
I liked your house. I think it was very nice.
I did work hard on it.
Yeah, it was very nice. So I think you downplayed a little bit, but I thought it was lovely. Jerry, tell us a little bit about the structure for your transition.
All of ours has been gifted. My father-in-law gave the land to my wife and I, and this is just the simple part of it. And by the way, I am a total layman with this stuff. I may use incorrect legal terms, and I may not get everything right here, and I really don't want to get nasty letters from your lawyers after that. But you said, so total, we hired good people to do this, because even just gifting, and we are gifting to the next generation as well, even gifting is hard. It's expensive. It's like I just want to give it away, and oh well, that's going to cost you several $1,000s. And there's we are truly blessed in our situation, because there has not been any, unlike your situation, there's been no mortgage on that land since the early 80s, before the farm crisis. And my father-in-law refused to carry debt. We refused to carry debt. And so we are given that. We are that advantage. And if we're going to keep that land protected, I'm trying not to choke up here. If we're going to keep that land protected, we take advantage of what we've been given there. It's not, there's probably no one else in this room who's in that situation, but we are. And so we're doing it, and we're doing it as conscientiously as possible. And you can do all the planning in the world with this. Instruments, we used transfer on death deeds. We used a life estate. Transfer on death deeds, pretty cool stuff. Doesn't protect you from Medicaid. And that is a major, major issue. And so my wife and I are working on, if we have to go in the nursing home, if we need long-term health care insurance, we don't have that kind of cash. but we have land. Well, we don't want that land to go to pay for our health care. So how are we going to protect that? And we did that with my father-in-law. And we also kept him at home till he was 98 years old. And then he spent the last 18 days of his life in a nursing home. Transfer on death deeds, life estate, which is that part of what they're talking about with the diminishing ownership in the farm. And there's this wonderful term called the 7-year look back. I think I'll just leave that one dangling there for this. Probably people can explain it better than I. So there is so much risk involved, even in giving it away, and so much cost. I'll leave it at that.
No, that's great. And yeah, I don't think you said anything that'll get you in trouble because it's yours. You can give it away as you wish. But I think it was smart to, get some advice and some leadership because it can be full of potential pitfalls. And so that's sort of the next portion I'd like to get into, which is what works and what, if at all, to avoid that you can kind of, give some feedback from what you experienced. So what worked and what to avoid? You were just going to go back and forth.
Okay, we're going to go, bounce back and forth. We knew we needed a lawyer. We needed a good estate attorney and to advise us on this because you can get in some real trouble trying to do it yourself. Now, some of you may be able to do it yourself and are smarter than I am. And that's not, all modesty aside, I am not smart enough to do that. And then we had just this act of grace that landed this lawyer in our laps. We were about to sign on with a retainer and everything with a firm in the Twin Cities and on a Friday, and I was going to sign the papers on a Monday, and in between the church services at the church where I go, they're doing stewardship talks, and this lawyer is talking about estate planning and protecting property. And there's 25 people in the room, and he's talking straight to me. We canceled the retainer, and we hired him. He grew up in my county on a farm, and he has been a godsend. We couldn't have done it well without him. And there were previous lawyers in the previous transition. So a good lawyer who knows your county, and I'm probably describing a creature that doesn't exist, but that is one of the most important tools we had. There's all those other terms, capital gains, all of those kinds of things that can just wreck a family coming into a farm. It's like, oh, they gave us the farm and but we didn't do the step up in valuation. Now we're getting hit with capital gains tax. Could put them out of business.
Luckily, tomorrow I'm moderating 2 panels with attorneys. Because we'll see if it's good or not. My part, anyway. The attorneys, I have the utmost confidence in. So you've got this team all put together, but you have to have somebody that you are working with, and that's I think you've had a number of people in the past that you've kind of checked out. And I wonder if, that's one of the pitfalls is thinking that, I know how I'm going to do this. I'm going to find this young family and they're going to come in and it's all going to be, and, from what I understand, a lot of people think they can rein this thing in and march it over here and march it over there. And you're just talking about, what was the euphemism for processing calves this afternoon?
Oh, we're not really going to.
No, we're not going to do that. Okay, but the point is that you can have every best intention when you're doing that, and that isn't necessarily what's going to happen. So some of those pitfalls, like what are some things that people should avoid?
Well, I think you hit on, and I don't mean to be hogging this because Carmen has probably forgotten.
I'll keep going.
Okay, more about farm transitions since breakfast than I'll know in my whole life. having the people. That is one of the biggest risks. If you don't have the right people to pass it on to, this is why so many people just sell.
Yeah.
You know, just you couldn't find somebody. And we did a bunch of auditioning. We did all kinds of things to try to find people. You did that too, I know. And it went from, oh yeah, they really want a farm, but they got a different farm. Oh well, great, mission accomplished, but not for our, to the point where we actually had to evict someone off of our farm. I mean, it just got kind of, and then we gave up. And we just said, that's it. We're just going to take a break from this. And then this young, newly married couple came to us, local, farm family, not enough land for the youngest. You know, it sounds like that old story from Sweden or something. You know, they're, oh, not enough. You got to go. Well, and they came to us and said, we hear you want to transition your farm to someone who will take care of the land. We would like to do that for you. And now they moved in a year ago. They have their place built, their house, and there's now 5 of them since that transition started. And we have like instant grandkids that we can just send home.
That's great. Lynne, what's one thing that you felt really worked and one thing that you can help people maybe to avoid?
Well, I think the thing that really worked, first of all, is getting the right people in place and, you know, working with land stewardship. I did that in the past too, but I'm talking about the transition here. So working with American Farmland Trust and Renewing the Countryside was the big piece towards me starting to get solutions. And the things that didn't work for me were a lot of what you talked about. I spent money on lawyers who weren't very helpful. I did some of the marketing myself for the first 2 years, and I would really not recommend that because I was trying to run the business at the same time. It was hugely time consuming, and it just was a lot of dead ends because finding the person to match what you've been doing and being able to step in is not easy. And especially when you have a business connected with the farm, there's infrastructure that's related to that business. So things get more complicated as you build and as you grow and as you have your business develop, and that makes it harder to find just the right person unless you've been cultivating that person from the very beginning. So you can go down a lot of dead ends trying to find the right person yourself.
And Carmen, tell us something that you feel was a big win, of something that you feel really helped you move your transition along, and maybe one thing that you can, create a cautionary tale or something for people to watch out for that maybe didn't work along the way.
Yeah, let me go through a couple things quite quickly. I think for me, the big issue was how can I keep the farm organic, because I wasn't going to live forever. So it started with a tax man recommending a person that we start talking to, and so we went and talked to this person, and almost instantly figured out this person wasn't understanding where Sally and I were coming from. So we went back home and talked to our tax man again, and he said, well, why don't you go to the local lawyer in town? And so we did, and it so happened that he'd been working with a number of families in the area with the Family Limited Partnership program. And so he gave us what I call a boilerplate document that we could start reading through. And over the next 2 or 3, maybe even 4 years, we had that document, and we'd go out on a camping trip or a vacation or traveling. Sally would read through the document, and as we were traveling, we would discuss it and plug in our own personal ideas on how they would fit into this document. And And so by the time we'd gotten through it several times, we began to realize that this looked like the instrument that would work for us, because not only would it protect the land, but it would also give Sally and me some added income over the years as we move the land into transition. So once we got that going, then the other piece that what I really had to figure out is how we could engage the children. And so we kept sharing that idea with them. But as many of you who are farming know that when it comes to the end of your farming days, you can all of a sudden be faced with a large tax liability because you can still have crop inventory and machinery inventory to deal with, even though you might be renting the land out, because your tax write-offs do no longer exist. And so trying to understand the tax liabilities that were going to happen was really focusing on my mind. But much like Jerry, the opportunity I had was from heaven, I guess. About 5-6 years before I was ready to retire, a neighboring kid came over one day and says, "I want you to show me how to farm organic." I says, "Okay, I'll work with you." He says, "I just want to work with you, learn how it works, and then I can do my own thing." He worked with me that summer. End of the summer, I said, "Luke, I'm going to need somebody to take over this farm because the kids aren't going to be farming. They love the farm, etc. So the option is there for you to come back." And he went and farmed himself the next year, but at the end of that year, he came back and he says, "That option open yet?" And I said, "Yes, it is." I said, "Well, I'd like to take you up on that." I said, "Great," because I want to keep the farm organic. But I said, "Luke, it's going to take me 2 years then to adjust myself mentally." And so over that 2-year period, I got to learn who Luke was. I got to learn who his family was. And my 4 kids also got to learn who Luke and his family were. And so at the end of those 2 years, Luke and Allie started renting the land from the partnership. The other piece that comes into play here, and I think when we talk about tax liabilities and tax exposure, I had over the years developed a really great line of machinery. Organic prices were good over the years, so I could build up a really sound financial standing. And so I talked to Luke and I said, "Luke, you could use some help in this machinery thing. What you've got is barely holding you together." So I said, "Here's what we'll do. We'll take all that machinery and we'll have a third party give it a value, value as of January 1st, 2020. We'll look at that list, look at the values, and you decide what you want and what you don't want. And that machinery then you can buy. But," I said, "Luke, I don't want you to start paying for that machinery for at least 3 years because I've got inventory to figure out. I've got other things that are going to give me tax exposure." And so not only was I able to start a family renting the land, but I was also able to finance this young farm couple to start farming with equipment that they could be successful with. And so over the years, that has been really a great thing. And I'm trying to think of the issues, but I think I haven't anything that I really think went south on me.
Well, I think I can name one, is starting off with the wrong team. And I think you all said that, is you all started down the track with the wrong team in your court. And that's the cautionary tale, is to make sure that your goals are being heard and respected and are reflected back, and you can see yourself in those. Bonnie, thank you so much, Carmen. I'm going to take some questions now. So Bonnie, if you want to bring those up, have you curated them? That's the word of the day. There's more. Well, crazy. Here, I'm going to give you, why don't you take Lynne's mic, and you can read those. Yeah.
I think it's better to focus one question on one person.
Yes, yeah, let's just, if you can read them, you might be able to suss out who it kind of was for.
Okay, this is working. Yay. Hi, everybody. Okay, so I'm going to go through a few.
Oh, does everyone know who Bonnie is? Bonnie?
Hi.
Bonnie Warndahl works for Renewing the Countryside. She is the perfect person for this because she is not only a land access navigator, but a farmland owner navigator as well. So kind of sees both sides.
I guess that's true. I didn't think about it that way. This might have been, well, Carmen definitely answered this in just in his last segment, but maybe, well, and so did Jerry. Where did you find your successor? So Lynne, where did you find your successor? And well, there's two together here. So it was like, where did you find your successor? And like, did you try to work with family first?
Yes, to both. And the successor came through the efforts of Renewing the Countryside. We did interviews. They did a process of evaluating people. We did tours. So there were a number of times where all of the candidates who were potential successors came out to the farm. People got to see my business, got to hear about my business. I shared all my numbers. So we really did scour for farmers who were ready to take over that operation. There were things in place that just about any farmer could take advantage of, so that was one of the advantages there. There was a water line in the pasture, there was fencing, there was a building that had multiple uses and another one that could be converted into other uses. So yeah, you guys found the people. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, some of them I knew, but you basically located the pool. Yeah.
And then we had a sort of a group that were a little bit outside of you to kind of look at that group and,
Right.
and make recommendations because.
Right, I had no decision. I was not involved in the decision of who would take over. That decision was not mine.
It's a little bit different, but worked. Next. I think we've got 5 minutes left.
As people keep talking, the questions keep getting answered. So I think we'll go with, what were the main challenges you faced in ensuring a profitable and sustainable operation to pass along? So what were your biggest challenges in passing along a profitable and sustainable farm operation?
So is this a question of how are you going to pay yourself when you give away this piece of land? Is that what you're asking?
I am so unqualified to answer this. We just, my wife and I are both from arts backgrounds, and you know, we're used to being impoverished as artists, and you've probably heard the phrase "land rich, cash poor." You know, we have enough to get along. And I work for Sustainable Farming Association. I'm looking at Lucinda here, my boss, and other resources, which we are just so grateful for. And then the farm still has to make money. It can't lose money, and it does not. The garlic always makes money. Grass-fed beef, yeah, depending on if it's a drought or not, makes money. So we're less concerned about that, which could be just totally naive of us. But we feel like if we're doing the right thing without getting too woo-woo here, we're going to be taken care of. And so far it's worked. So who knows, tomorrow it may all come crashing down.
And let's throw it up to, yeah, Carmen, if you want to chime in on that.
Yeah, just briefly, part of it was a consideration. Social Security was not going to be enough for us to live on once we gave up income off of the farm. And so with the family limited partnership, having built in there what they call a management fee for the general partner was going to supplement our income. But on the other hand, if you're going to have a young farm family come in and take over, besides what I talked about machinery, land rentals certainly can be a challenge. And because it's organic, you have special practices that you have to keep in place. And so the other agreement that I had with Luke and Allie is that I will always be 3 years out on the cash rent, so that they will know that if things change in their life or things change in Sally and my life, we will each of us have 3 years to get things turned around or changed. And so lending that stability not only to the renter, but to us as people living off the land, because that was going to remain our major source of income. We had to figure out things from both sides. And so that's sort of how we dealt with it. And again, I come back to how we ever ended up with Luke and Allie it's just unbelievable, because I knew they could do the organic thing, but I wanted to make sure that a young family like that going into debt, that they had some way of assurance that they had time to figure things out.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Do you have another question? Yep.
I do have another question. This could apply to all three of you. What most surprised you about transferring to a new generation, and what was the hardest part?
Yep, we'll start with you, Carmen.
No doubt the hardest part for me was letting go. It's not that I couldn't deal with it, but that's part of the reason why I told Luke right from the beginning, Luke, I need 2 years. I know I need 2 years, because all of a sudden I have to start thinking about, hey, next year I'm not going to be making these decisions. And so that for sure was the hardest, most challenging thing. What was the other part of the question?
What most surprised you about transferring?
What surprised me, and I think it's unique to us, but I think it could be unique to every family, is the willingness of Luke to be open with me and me with him, and avoiding any controversies or challenges right from the beginning. But what Luke and I told ourselves right from the beginning is we have to be open with each other all the time. And so what really was surprising is how both of us just really fell into that mode of operation, and it's really been fantastic over the years.
I'm going to bring you two in, and you can both say ditto on that part about it being hard to let go. I can see you getting misty, right? I mean, it is part of that. Or you can fill it in yourself. I won't put words in your mouth. But yeah, what was the hardest thing?
The hardest thing was dealing with all of the legalities. You know, it was like speaking Greek to me. I don't understand that phrase. You're going to have to sit, and of course we're paying this lawyer by the minute. It's like, no, explain what that means. You know. But he was very tolerant with it. That was the hardest part, was learning this whole new vocabulary and discipline of the legal stuff. The most surprising thing was how the honesty that Carmen refers to. That here's this native Minnesota, well, she's from elsewhere, Italy and all, but you know, he's from Minnesota. I'm from the South. You know, we just kind of blurt things out. And my wife is also non-typical Minnesota. She's relentlessly honest and candid, and so are they. And so we can just do it. We can just say, you know, that's not going to work. The young man likes to give the example that why do I need that big pile of baling twine And I mean, it's a big, right there at the feed bunk. You know, when are you ever going to, and that's just kind of an example of what we disagree on. It's like, you don't know, we might need that.
Farms are filled with that. We have just a couple minutes left and you get to.
Yeah, I mean, letting go is really hard. And it's going to be hard for anybody who gets attached to a place or people or anything. So it's a process. It's going to happen throughout your life. So get ready. It keeps happening over and over. And then the other thing is communication. I mean, it kind of echoes what other people have said. Communication is difficult and hard. And sometimes when you think you're speaking the same language and you think you're being heard, you're not. And so having the same conversation multiple times is what I would recommend.
And what surprised you?
Everything. I'm still surprised. I'm here. Why am I here? I don't know. I'm surprised by the whole process. It worked. That's surprising. There were many, many days when it didn't seem like it was going to work. So kudos to you guys.
Yeah.
It worked.
Well, can we put our hands together and thank these people?